right now. Let's do some fan questions.
What's going on, Uncle Chael? So it's looking like Dana is setting up Aldo and Cejudo. What happens to Dominic Cruz? Does he have a fight on that card even? Does he have a fight before that? Does he wait? What do you think?
You know, it is what do I think. It's not what do I know. I can't give you any inside info on that. Dominic got hurt. Dominic was delayed. Then Cejudo got hurt. Cejudo got delayed. They were going after each other. People wanted to see that fight. It made a level of sense. Aldo steps in. Aldo gets beat, which then struggles to make sense. But a lot of people thought Aldo won. It was a fresh coat of paint. It was some fresh blood amongst the greatest 45-pounder of all time, who's now down to 35. We can at least all agree, in Aldo versus Marlon, we can at least all agree that Aldo looked great. We might think that Marlon looked greater. So all of a sudden, look, if we're talking about doing that fight, then there would be nothing stopping us from bringing Dominic Cruz in, including his separation from time active. But there is some kind of an answer there. Is Dominic still hurt? Is Dominic not ready to be back at this point? And I bring that up because you said, would Dominic then fight on that card? No, I think if Dominic was fighting on that card, Dominic would be fighting Henry. That's what I think. I don't actually know that answer.
Hey, Chael, Benny here. Just wondering if you think Conor is actually a nice guy now because he realizes of all the mistakes that he made in the past, or do you think he's just playing this card right now, and when he gets in the blood feud with Khabib again, he's going to revert back to old Conor? Thanks.
This video is sponsored by NordLocker and is brought to you today by the folks at NordVPN. Are you ready to take back control of your online security and privacy? Look, guys, with NordLocker super fast encryption technology, you can now easily encrypt your files of any size. NordLocker gives you the ability to store and share files securely. This technology allows you to secure your photos and videos on any device, and it also protects your financial information and passwords from spying eyes. You can even share encrypted files via email or messaging. NordLocker is easy to use, so start protecting your data today. Guys, here's a deal for you. Use the promo code Sonnen to receive 37% off. That's from me. Plus, you're going to get an extra 5% off. That's from Nord. Thank me later. Visit NordLocker.com today. You know, I got to tell you, Conor did a very good job with PR. And he had somebody that grabbed him and sat him down and said, look, here's what this week and this buildup needs to look like. And it was somebody that Conor listened to and somebody that Conor respected. And Conor executed to the highest of levels. I've never spoke about something over here. I've been very careful to not do it. I was on Dan Le Batard's show earlier in the week. Dan brought it up, and that was my first time to speak about it. I want to make sure I pick my words very carefully because Conor was accused of sexual assault. And that is the worst kept secret in MMA, and we all do understand that. But one of the better kept secrets is there anything to this? And Conor says no. But Conor's denial of this, and I'm only telling you the stories that I have heard directly from the principals here. I'm not sharing an opinion. It is something very different for Conor to say, I did not do this. That would be in line with many people who have been accused of such a terrible thing to have your name associated with. This was totally different, though. Conor said, not only did I not do this, guys, I've not even been accused of doing this. The rumor that I'm being accused of this is a false rumor. Don't even get into the X's and O's of did this, my story versus the other party's story. I'm telling you, I'm not even accused of this. Now that is a totally different denial. It really is. In many ways, there's a totally different denial. Because now we don't have anybody else. We have third and fourth and fifth parties known as tabloids who grabbed a story. We don't have Conor's word versus another person's word. We have Conor saying, I didn't do that, and that's the only person we've heard from, versus 4 and 5 step removed tabloid. The results are going to play out on this. But if you want to be at all a fair human being, when you have the word of Conor versus 4 and 5 step remove headline, you only have one word. This is what he is saying. It is not me. Not just I didn't do this. I am not even being accused of doing this. So when you look at Conor and his PR and wanting to, rechange things, look, let's take him at his word here. Yeah, you're going to want to make some changes. You're going to want to leave a different impression. Your name does matter. He's worked very hard and he has achieved a lot to get his name in certain places. And he's had to deal with the vandalism and throwing a bus. And there was the guy in the bar. I mean, he's had to deal with some stuff that wasn't great. But it's a whole nother level where they're trying to drag him. And for him to try to come out and say, look, man, I'm a real guy that does a real sport, who went out a little couple too many times and had a little of my own whiskey, and leave it at that. If there's no other evidence against that, then we got to side with Conor.
What's up, Uncle Chael? It's your boy Alex here from Kentucky. And I've just got a couple of quick questions for you about Mr. Edmund Shabazian. Now, rumor has it that he's managed by Ronda Rousey. One of my questions is, do you think that's just a title to help publicity, or do you think Ronda Rousey is actually in the scenes for management? And question number 2 is, with him being ranked number 9, with 11 wins, 0 losses, 9 of those being first-round knockouts, and 1 of those being a first-round submission, who do you think is next for him, with the top 5 being riddled with killers like Costa, Romero, Whitaker? I mean, I'm just curious about what your thoughts are on who he should face next and what route would get him to the title fastest.
Good for you for recognizing Shabazian for one. And he just popped on my radar in his very last fight. I'm aware how good his record is and how well he's done. I had not become familiar with him. And part of that, and the reason I stopped and watched in the first place, was because Ronda was his manager. I thought that was a good storyline. I thought there was something compelling about that. You don't hear a lot of women managers. You don't hear of Ronda managing anybody. I mean, there's a certain something storyline to that. And that was what got me to stop and pay attention. Then when I see Shabazian's skills, whoa, this guy's the real deal. I agree with you. I think you're asking in the weeds, is Ronda really on the phone call and helping to manage this guy's career? That would be a stretch for me. I would level that at no, she's not. But they are teammates. And Ronda is very good to her teammates. It's a reality that they are former teammates, I suppose, because Ronda has moved on and isn't spending a lot of time in the gym. No, I personally think that that's probably more of a marketing ploy, but I think it's still a wise one. And let's say she is doing it. Oh, okay, great. Full credit to her for doing it. But let's say she's not. Say I'm right. I'm taking a guess here. It was very wise marketing by Shabazian to go to Ronda in the first place and say, hey, by the way, I'm going with this storyline that you're my manager. Are you cool with that? Or are you going to... You're going to ruin my gimmick on this. If she goes, no, that's cool, use my name. Okay, great. I mean, here we are discussing it, which I think proves the point that it's pretty helpful. When you talk about Shabazian's skills, man, this guy's the real thing. Who should he fight next? At some point, he's going to have to take a big step. That's just the way it goes. I think, matchup-wise, as far as catapulting a young, what is he, 21 years old? To catapult a young guy, I think that Darren Till would be the most exciting matchup. Is he ready for Darren Till? I don't know about that. But, I mean, what do you want to do? Do you want to do the slow burn and hope that it catches on and guys like you and I discuss it and put it on the internet? Or do you want to take that big leap where, okay, there's nothing more that can be said. I'm the guy. That's what Till did. Till got a fight with Cowboy. All of a sudden, Till was going to be world champion. Got put it right on that track, even got the world title fight. In many ways, Till's back in that conversation at 185, but I do think that Shabazian is somebody that could be considered. If you want to know an exciting matchup, Shabazian, Darren Till.
Hello, Chael. I was watching boxing interviews, and many coaches say they like having a skinnier fighter, having a more agile and fast fighter. So, what do you think's the best physique for an MMA fighter? Because, wrestling and jiu-jitsu favour a more strong fighter. So, what do you think about that?
Okay, so I think you asked me 2 questions. The way I first heard that is that you were watching boxing, and they were talking about being agile and being fast, but you finished with asking about MMA, and the reason I have to make sure I have your distinction clearly. Teddy Atlas asked the question one time. It was a rhetorical question, but he asked the question. The only thing we don't know as far as weightlifting, strength, and boxing go is lifting weights bad for you, or is it really bad for you? But they're 2 different sports. I couldn't tell you that lifting weights and being strong isn't relevant to MMA, because in wrestling, strength really matters. In boxing, it does not. I understand that power matters, but the power comes from speed. It comes from accuracy. It comes from timing. More than anything, it really comes from the speed. How fast can you get there? How can you turn your hips? How many times can you chop this tree in front of you? How many times can you get out of the way as it's trying to chop you down? I mean, it's an accumulation sport to the highest of levels, and those guys really don't lift weights. The few boxers that do lift, and there was some who did, Evander Holyfield lifted, but he was also trying to move up in weight classes, and he lifted different. Evander's regimen was very lightweight for very high reps. And what that will do is it won't put size on you, and they're worried about the size. They're worried about being muscle-bound and losing some of their speed and being stiff. They want to be loose out there. But the one thing that will happen if you're using a low amount of weight and you're doing it a whole bunch of times, you're going to start to build lactic acid. Your muscle fibers are going to start to tire. They are going to start to grow. They are going to start to spread a little bit, but it is a minuscule amount. Your lactic acid build and your threshold can go up greatly. And so now it becomes a conditioning exercise, right? You're getting stronger at almost everything that you're doing actively. You could be out there playing baseball. If you're swinging that batter, I mean, everything that you do does help to build some of your muscles, but we're also talking on minuscule levels. Largely, muscle growth comes through an attempt at muscle growth. Now, nutrition, taking in more protein, the hours of the day that you take it in, understanding that your body can only ingest 14 grams of protein in an hour, so anything else that you put in within that hour is going to go to waste. So to spread that protein out throughout the day, having an understanding of this, and then going ahead and doing some of those muscle and weight training skills, that's going to grow at an exponential speed. So largely, two-part question, boxers, stay away from it. Focus on your speed, getting the excess weight off you that you can. Go in there lean because it's going to make you quicker, and you are trying to chop down a tree. And how many strikes you get in, how many times you hit that tree is going to matter, as well as being able to get out of the way. For MMA, strength is a very real thing because of the wrestling component. And in wrestling isn't just takedowns or when you're on top and you're on bottom. Wrestling is also clinch work. I think if you go back to as recently this weekend and you see how Holly Holm was able to control a fight with Raquel Pennington because of her wrestling. And Holly never took her down once or even tried, but she wrestled her the entire fight. And she annoyed her the whole time. She annoyed her to the point that Raquel is coming out after the fight and saying, I wanted to fight you, not hug you. Well, that's a frustrated person who got out hugged. Which comes to strength, which comes back to wrestling.
Uncle Chael, which one of your fights were you the biggest underdog in, not counting anything Anderson Silva related? Because you've had some big fights with some of the biggest names in the business. Like the Shogun fight, and you submitted him pretty quick, and you had to console him afterwards. Can you tell us what you said to him afterwards? Because he was just distraught. The Bisping fight was awesome too. Looked like it was a good game plan, and you stuck to it. Which one of those in your career were you the biggest underdog? Thanks.
I can't tell you which one I was the biggest underdog. I just never knew those odds. But I can tell you one I was an underdog and I shouldn't have been. One that they just got wrong. I fought a guy named Amar Sulawev. And Sulawev was a very good fighter, very talented guy, who the world has actually lost. Rest his soul. This is all meant to be respectful. But to recap that point in time, he had come through the UFC and was very well known. And there was a time in life when if you were a UFC veteran, boy, that was enough. On the smaller regional scene, if they could put UFC vet next to your name, you were going to sell a whole bunch of tickets. That was a really big deal. And this was a different time when the UFC was having 6 shows a year. The word Strikeforce wasn't created yet. The word Bellator did not exist yet. Pride was out there and the UFC was out there. So if you're a veteran of one of these two things, you were in a very elite class in all fairness. He had had a couple of UFC fights. I was never given my opportunity at that point. So when we met up, just on name recognition and alone, he was a 2.5 to 1 favorite. And I remember seeing the guy, and I remember knowing his skills, and I had a full appreciation. But I do remember no, this is a really bad matchup. First off, he's the size of a welterweight, but we're fighting at middle. He was one of these guys that never really got into the right weight class. We're fighting at middle. And secondly, he's a striker. I'm a wrestler. This sport's been around long enough. That just doesn't really work. So I don't know where I went in the heaviest underdog, but I will share with you a time I never should have been an underdog. Would have been that night. Bodog fights and I took on Amar Sulawev.